everyone. I think we've got a few more people still to come, but I'll just get started with a little bit of housekeeping anyway. So as we mentioned in the email, this session is being recorded. So if you prefer to be anonymous, you can turn off your camera and just change your name, just to make sure that you're not going to appear on the video. Now, you are also welcome to turn on your camera, because whenever you're presenting, it is nice to be able to see a few faces rather than talking to a computer screen. So please feel free, if you want to appear, please do, you can pop it on. We just ask that when you're not speaking, if you could just keep yourselves muted, just to kind of save a wee bit of background noise interfering with Chris's presentation. We will be happy to answer questions as we go along. Just because there's a few different participants, if you can just pop up your hand, or you can use the wee hand button at the bottom of the screen, and then Chris can come back to you. So he can, or if you prefer, you can pop in a wee message in the chat box, and I can always ask the question for you. And if you have any technical questions about Zoom, something not working, you can pop that in the chat box as well. So I will just do a quick introduction to the Arts Challenge itself. I noticed there's a few familiar names, so you might have already come to a couple of different workshops, but for anyone that's new to us, the Heritage Arts Challenge is a project that Ulster Architectural Heritage are doing, supported by the Heritage Lottery Fund. And it's designed to encourage people to look at built heritage just in a different way through different art forms. So Chris's workshop today is the last of the series. So obviously, you know yourself, you're looking at photography today. But we've also looked at poetry, prose, songwriting, and drawing and illustration as well. And those workshops are available for you to catch up on if you missed any of those too. I'll pop the wee link in the chat box later on. So just before we get started, I'll do a very brief introduction to Chris for anyone who doesn't know him. So Christopher Barr is an Irish artist and educator based in Belfast and Dublin. His photographic work has been exhibited widely in galleries, public spaces and festivals all over the world, including the 4th International Photography Festival, where he represented Ireland. His publications include Element Shanghai, the Wall Street Journal, the Sunday Times, the Guardian, the Irish Times, the Independent, Vogue and Variety. So Chris, I will pass over to you and you can do a little bit more of an introduction about yourself and we can get started.
Oh my gosh, that's always a worry, isn't it? Guys, you have to excuse me. I've just got over COVID for the second time. I know. So I'm croaky, I'm chewing gum, and I'm drinking water. All the things that we don't want to do on a Zoom meeting. But I can't. If I don't chew gum, I just cough the whole time, which would be a disaster. My family are downstairs. They have all got it. So I have a rogue 2.5-year-old. My wife is usually on the ball. At gathering him when he runs. She's laid on the sofa, so he may come in through the door at any point. Isabel has already witnessed him come in. So if he does, what we'll do is I'll get him to say hi, and then I'll spin him around and send him out. Okay, my name's Chris Barr. I'm going to share the screen. You have to excuse me. It's a while since I have used Zoom, so you after the using it so much. You guys can see this, yeah? Okay. This is secretly endearing you to me without you knowing. It's like a psychological trick someone told me to use once. Put a picture of yourself up as a kid and people they'll be easy on you. Okay, I'm going to take you through a wee bit, a quick how I got from A to B or A to Z. With regards to photography, I have a very wibbly wobbly route through stuff. It's to give you an idea of kind of the stuff that I do. And I don't consider myself to be a photographer, which is probably, I kind of have two different lives. I would consider myself to be a fine artist, which kind of sits easier on my shoulders. I used to think I was a photographer, and then I realized very quickly, and maybe I wasn't. So I'm going to take you through this really quickly. Don't judge me, okay? This is just fact. Let me see if this is gonna, oh gosh. Let me just see if I can get in here and make this full screen. You see that now, full screen, yeah? Mm-hmm. Yeah?
I think you have to unshare and then share again as full screen because it's still showing the.
Okay. You see where it's going? Like that. See how it's going, guys? I've still got the COVID.
There you go.
which is, okay, we're there. Okay, how did I get here? Such a question. I grew up, this will be very quick. It starts at 15 and then speeds quite quickly through. I grew up in just outside Hollywood in a place called Cultraw. With my grandfather, who was an ardent socialist, and at the age of 15, 1982, decided to be a great opportunity for me to leave home and go on an adventure for the rest of my life. That would have been all. I was talking about this yesterday to a friend. That would be all well and good if I had the skills of an ordinary 15-year-old. I didn't. I had been a sort of spoiled 15-year-old up to that point. So off I set, and ended up very quickly realizing that life wasn't easy. I ended up squatting. I don't know if people know what squatting is, and don't judge me. These were old houses in Belfast that were derelict, and we weren't stealing people's houses off them. This was just it wasn't a big career choice. So this is kind of how I fell in love with buildings. I think I was the only person that was in these squats that was fascinated by the architecture. Everyone else was just fascinated by being warm and staying safe. But I found these details in the buildings absolutely fantastic. So at 15, I did that for, gosh, on and off for 12 years, more on than off. Then I became a caretaker in County Hall, Coleraine. I was there for, I think 15 years, all in all. About 13 years in, my next door neighbour, a guy called Alistair McCook, who was an ardent bike photographer, motorbike photographer, offered me a camera for sale. And I had been going into Alistair's side room. We lived in Portrush, Coast Guard Cottage. It was beautiful. And he had a room. And on Saturday morning, we would close all the blinds, tape them up, set up a dark room, and develop photographs. And I used to go in, and he would open a beer unnaturally early. And we would sit down, and he would process and develop photographs. And I was mesmerized. I just had never seen anything like it. It was the smells, you know, looking at this little negative and then seeing a big print and all the things that we did with it, all the dodging and burning and everything else. So he offered me a camera for sale and I said, absolutely. So it was a Canon 81, which is pretty boring technical detail. I got the camera and I went straight to Coleraine Chronicle and said I was a freelance photojournalist who'd moved into the area. That wasn't particularly true, but I thought it was a good way of kind of getting off to a good start with photography. They gave me 2 rolls of film. It wasn't digital at that time, obviously. And they sent me to Achadui Racecourse. I knew nothing about motorbikes other than seeing Alistair printing them. And I knew nothing about photography other than how to load a piece of film into a camera. I came back and got some images printed in the paper. And my mum, I remember my mum being absolutely delighted, buying two copies and giving one to my auntie just to show off. I did that. I then, about 2 years later, I was in a friend's house and a guy walked in through the door and me and him started chatting and we kind of became pretty good friends really quickly. It was kind of bizarre. It was like a bromance. And this guy was a professor at University of Ulster, a guy called Terence Zeman, and he was an Africanist. He was educated in Ivy League in America, very bright, kind of kept saying things and then tell me the Greek meaning. And I kind of was like, oh my goodness, I kind of like Terence. He's kind of fascinating, but not in an assy way. He said to me he was bringing over a revolutionary poet from Namibia to the University of Ulster, and would I be interested in documenting the journey? And I said, absolutely, I would love to do that. So I went and met a guy called Kiametsi Molopong, Kiametsi Joseph Molopong, and he was here for 4 weeks in Ulster doing teaching performance, poetry performance. So I photographed him really badly. And after the 4 weeks, I had a small exhibition in the University of Ulster, you know, photographs pinned on the wall. But it was kind of something that kind of pinged me. I gave Joseph a set of photographs to go back to Africa with. And about 2 months later, I got a letter from the British Council that asked me would I be interested in flying out to Africa to work with Joseph on a poetry book. And I was like, no, I was still a caretaker at this point. And I said, absolutely. I'd love to do that. And they said my flights would be paid. I'd be put up when I got there. I'd be there for 6 weeks. And at the end of it, my photographs would be used in the book. So that was kind of, things were kind of slowly starting to change. And I found out that Terence, the Africanist, had in the background been writing for funding from, I think it was the Finnish embassy and British consulate got together to fly me out. So off I set I went to, every time, for about 3 weeks, every time a plane went overhead, my heart sunk, because they'd given me the task of producing 360 photographs, and I bought 10 rolls of film that were 36 photographs in each, so there was no margin for error. I flew out with a tenner. This is not a word of a lie. I bought a coat because my friend said it was going to be cold at night in Africa, which I couldn't believe. And I brought a tenner, which I didn't even get changed into Namibian dollar. So I landed in South Africa, parched with water. I drank water from a tap. I did everything that you could do wrong. Fine, stayed for 6 weeks, and at night would sit and read poetry. And then in the morning, I would go out and walk around with Joseph around the townships and make work. Now, in hindsight, that's a pretty crazy mix of a kind of a working class Irish guy and a solid revolutionary poet in Africa. Our existence really had very little in common, apart from we got on. So I did that, and at the end, and this is the important bit, at the end we were sitting in the editor's house and the photographs were all around the table, and they were doing a kind of a slow edit, and they'd invited lots of friends over, and it was kind of a soiree, and there was James Suzman. We had to do an introduction, and the first guy, I'm a pretty nervous person now. The first person was a smuts fellow from Cambridge or Oxford, James Suzman. Next person was Anita Roddick's top scientist, and around the table they're all just eminent guys in their field, all like having a blast for the Times or the New York Times or whatever. And it came to me and I said, Chris Barr, caretaker, County Hall, Coleraine. And they all roared. And my friend Terence there, and he said, Chris was a caretaker. And that was the moment where things shifted. I come home and I decided I was going to not be a caretaker anymore. Oh, sorry, see if I can go back. Oh, I can't. Anyway, let me see, maybe I can. See how professional I am with these things? Oh, I can. There we go. So I went back and applied for university. Terence said there was something wrong with me because I seemed bright, but I was awfully stupid. I didn't understand quite what he meant. So I literally got a prospectus. You'll see where this is going. I got a prospectus, looked through it, and literally it was a course that didn't have much writing involved. I didn't know how to do English Lits. I didn't know how to do history. I went to art college and I studied graphic design and illustration because I thought that was the path of least resistance to get a degree. I went from interview, I got in, I did okay. I got tested for dyslexia whenever I was there, and it turned out I had a reading age of 11, which kind of explained all the jobs, cleaning bins and caretakering that I'd had all my life. So things kind of were shifting a bit with regards to photography. I went and worked for an international press agency to kind of pay my way through university. I think I was 37 at this point, so I wasn't young. And at that point, I thought actually I'd found my calling. And then I realized really quickly, about 3 weeks in, the troubles didn't excite me. They actually made me feel desperately unhappy. The people I was working with, they've been doing it so long that whenever something happened, it wasn't that they were glad it happened. It was part of their psyche that it was a job for them to do and everything else. So instead of going out and taking photographs, I started archiving the images, the million images of the troubles, and I started archiving those images. So my job was to go in, open an envelope, take out the negatives, look through the loop, which is one of these things here. I'm showing you what that is, a little eyepiece, look through and look for faces, buildings, anything that other newspapers around the world would buy, they'd find interesting. So I was opening envelopes that were at 1981. The envelope was 1981, and I did that for 2 years, and I think I got through to 1980, halfway through 82, and it was an education in photography for me because it was about how to look at an image, not how to take an image, but looking at images, reading an image, and all the stuff that's important around that. In the meantime, I had got another job doing stills on feature films, which was better paid, but was kind of, I don't know what you'd say, it wasn't as interesting for me intellectually. It wasn't as interesting. It was really good money and everything else, but it didn't really ping me. So I did that on and off, along with the press agency stuff, and then I got my degree and decided to join the civil service again. This isn't a dig at any civil servants. This is just how I felt after university and the stills and the international stuff. And I did it to try and prove a point, because as a caretaker, I was the lowest grade in the building. And I went in as a staff officer, which is the highest grade, but it was up the rung a bit. And it kind of soothed something in me. I did it for a year, and then I was asked back to university to do some classes. I don't have any here, artist notebooks. I record things fastidiously, that any projects I'm working on, I record them. So they brought me back in to do some part-time teaching on how I used my artist notebooks as a resource and document. So I did that, and I kept getting asked in more and more and more. So at one point, I thought it might be a nice idea actually to do more university stuff. So I decided to do an MFA. I got the MFA as my MFA cake. I couldn't get the MFA onto one cake, so I had to do it onto two. So I passed that, and that was a big shift for me, because I was kind of moving into the fine art realm, not just with regards to taking photographs, single images, which I'm going to talk about. This was making work in series, so I was telling stories through my work. So I started showing in China and all over the place, and it was kind of an ego trip in one sense, but it was informing my work and taking my practice somewhere completely different. Okay, I still teach at university. I left a while back to pursue the unit still stuff, because I had got a wife and 2 kids, and I realized that the easiest way to pay a mortgage is to have a job that pays well. So this is my dog coming in, by the way, in case you can hear him tip tapping. So I'd still do some part-time hours, and I'm currently writing up a PhD proposal. I haven't got in to do a PhD. My wife says she'll leave me because the master's was just hell for her, because she had to do all the edit bits for it, because I'm so not good at that sort of stuff. So that's kind of my background. Let me show you some of my work very quickly, which will be much quicker than, oh, sorry, that's an old page. How do I get out of this? Oh. Let me out now? Yeah?
Okay. You're not sharing at the moment.
Oh, I'm not good.
No.
Let me share this if I can. We're going to get into the guts of stuff very soon. Share. You can see that okay, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Go back to this. Okay. So at the minute, I kind of make my living, I suppose, in a few different ways. I still do teaching for courses like architecture and graphic design and various other bits and pieces. But I kind of now primarily make work like this to make money. So these are some of my recent work, I suppose, with regards to TV and film. It's all super disposable. I maybe don't take it as seriously as some of my peers take it. I'm much more interested in my academic work, but academic work means working in university full time, and I don't want to do that. I kind of like jumping off and having 2 days here doing that. My other work is, I'll show you this if I may. I work with Irish travellers for the past 19 years, one family in particular, and I'm making a family album. It's nothing grander, it's nothing more exciting. It's just a family album. It's just a documentation of one family over 19 years, and all the stuff that you put into a family album. These photographs have been fairly widely shown in British Journal of Photography, etc. And I always get slated for them because the aesthetic is poor at best, I would say. They're taken with a very, and I'm going to talk to you guys about this, they're taken in a very, very particular way that working with the travelers, it suits. So they're literally that. I also made a piece of work. Now there's a huge amount of work there. I did a piece of work a few years ago that I'm not going to show it actually because I haven't seen it in a while and I don't want to be teary. I documented my dad dying 4 years ago, and it was a kind of a 54-day experience of my dad asked me to take photographs so we could share them with family in Canada, and it was on Instagram, and it wasn't light in any stretch. I know Instagram is light, but it got a lot of traction, let's say, with regards to how we as a nation deal with death. It's very, very dark all of a sudden. My work is all about human rights and stuff like this. So you can go in and look at it for sure. It's an ongoing piece of work about my dad and myself. Okay, this other work here I'll not go into too much. Okay, because it's all along the same thread, but it's all making work in series. Okay, and I'm going to talk about that just in a second. So it's not taking one image, it's taking a few to take us on a journey. Does that seem like something that you guys want to talk about? Maybe. Yeah. Can I ask you guys, what is the level? Are we photographers? No. Are we? No. Good.
No, not really.
No, we're not.
Not really.
Good. That makes me feel much better. I always worry whenever the names pop up that it's somebody that right. University that's going to be like, okay. I don't want to patronize you at the same time, okay? But I'm just going to go through some stuff that I do as a photographer, okay, to help you take better images. Will you just butt in at any point and ask questions? Because there'll be an opportunity at the end as well. But let's see. Let me just do this again. Sorry for chewing gum as well. I can hear my mum telling me off. Okay, where am I? 2 seconds. Just to try and find. I'm just going to open a page here. Here we go. Brilliant. Okay. See if you can see. He's getting that? No?
Yeah, yeah.
Christopher Barr?
Yeah.
Blue screen? Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Okay. I'll stop the shot again just so you can see the full screen. Sorry, my computer's quite glitchy. That's it?
Yeah, perfect.
Good. Excuse me, I've clearly lost all my design knowledge over the years. I try and make these things as interesting as possible. Okay, let's see if I can get this to go. Ah, okay, brilliant. So, thoughts around photography. I'm going to, introduction we've just done. Architectural photography, I'm going to discuss what camera lens, very boring on sexy stuff. Best working practice, just with regards to, I don't know, some thoughts around approaching what you're going to do. Working in series, which will kind of for me be the guts of the whole thing, because that's kind of for me where the interest lies. These, you know, we can look up on Google any point, and then Q&A, so you can quiz me. And if I don't know it, I used to pretend I knew stuff. At this point, I'm just like, I'll just tell you I don't know it. I'll have to Google it, tell you the answer. Okay. So, very serious photograph of me. My wife said that wasn't the best image to use. Said it looked kind of thuggy. Okay. So architecture photography has a long history, okay? This heliographic image is the oldest surviving camera photograph. It was created by French inventor Niepce. Have you seen this photograph before? No?
No.
The oldest surviving photograph. 1820, I like the way it's so specific, 1826 or 1827 in Saint-Louis-de-Varnes in France, and shows parts of the building surrounding countryside of his estate, seen from the window. This was shown to me very, very early on by my friend Alistair whenever we were chatting about the motorbikes. He wanted to give me a good grounding on stuff. And I was always fascinated by it. I just think it's one of those photographs. It's so blurry. You know, they talk about the surrounding countryside. Not really getting much of the surrounding countryside. I can kind of see a buttress or whatever it is on the right-hand side, a bit of a slopey roof. That's it. The rest of the stuff is definitely in my imagination. And it always reminds me of Dracula's castle. I don't know why. It's always got that kind of eerie book cover for me. But it is the earliest surviving camera photograph. So, and it's of a building, so it's an architectural shot / landscape. You guys maybe, are you into landscape? Do we take photographs of landscapes or urban spaces or building? Yeah. Okay. Then this might be a wee bit patronizing at times, but I'm going to take you through a few architectural photographers. Well, is that the right word? Architectural photographers, I suppose, in this instance, and their work to let you see, because I really believe that we are what we eat. Okay. If we're looking at work, if we're looking at good work, we're more likely to be making good work. Okay. So I am always looking at new work, always looking at old work. I'm just looking at work all the time, and it's too, I don't know. Whenever I was doing my interview for university, there was a guy called Mike Cato, who's kind of an art historian. Do you know Mike Cato? No.
Yes.
Okay. So you know Mike's a pretty serious guy. At university, there was, if you were in late, you stood outside the door like a boy, and you weren't allowed in until the break. And if you left and didn't come back in, you would be sorely chastised. It was a proper old-fashioned university education at 37. It was very hard to take. But Mike would always go in and take you through stuff very in great detail. So on my first introduction to him, he asked me, sorry, it's my pen going funny. He asked me what who my influences were, and I sat and looked him in the eye and said I didn't have any, because I didn't want to sully my work with other people's thoughts. And he literally just looked at me, and it felt like for 5 minutes. And he said, "Are you being serious, son?" And I said, "I've been deadly serious." And he said, "You need to wise up." And I was like, "Oh gosh." And he said, "The library," I'll never forget this, he said, "The library's on the 2nd floor. I'd advise you now to go over and sit down, take some books off the thing, and start educating yourself." Now, at that point, I knew I'd get in. I knew my interview was successful, but I also felt about 3 foot small. So that was the beginning. He was brutally, Mike and I are friends now, but it was a brutal experience. But it really was, like I says to all the students now, that we are, if you're not looking at work, if you're not looking at good work, you're probably not making good work. You know, really, that's how I see it. So this is Bernice Abbott. Have we heard of Bernice? No. No. Bernice Abbott had always been associated, excuse me, with depictions of Manhattan through her iconic images of New York bridges, skyscraper stores, and street corners. Her specialty was crystal clear black and white images that were so legible that the viewer could make out the price of bread in a bakery window. For decades, she photographed the people, landscape, architecture, and cityscapes of the United States. For me, the interesting bit there is the price of the bread in the bakery window, because it takes us back to the first photograph ever made, where you couldn't even tell if there was a loaf anywhere in the vicinity. So Bernice's work, and I'm going to show it to you now, if I may. Bernice's work is particularly interesting. I'm going to have to nip in and out of these things just to cross-reference some stuff. Let me show you, if I may. So Bernice, this is we're so lucky. I have an 8.5-year-old, and I keep telling them we're so lucky to have these resources. You know, MoMA, Getty, there's a ton of stuff out there which is just incredible, and it lets you, have a good. I'm looking at this on a big screen, but even on your phone, you get a good reference of what the images are about and how they were taken, and and everything. So I'm just going to show you these and then talk a little bit about them, what I find interesting in them. Is that okay? And you guys can jump in and say what you think. Okay, so we'll go through them first. Okay, we'll do one more. There's a feast of stuff on here to look at. I'm going to chat very briefly about a few things that I pick up from this. One is that Bernice, for me, is challenged in some respects with regards to the cityscape. Trying to get a whole building in isn't going to be possible. So what we get a lot in our work are these kind of centralized images, and you learn pretty quickly to see what she's wanting you to see. Okay. But we're also getting stuff that I find, oh, there we go, incredibly interesting, which are the stuff that goes around it, that gives us scale, which gives us weather conditions. It gives us lots of other information. Okay. And as I say about being able to read stuff, whenever we first look at this, the fascinating thing is the windows. It's obviously a hot day. Also that, the site, the car, let me see if I can get back to this. Let's see, 2 seconds. The cars on the side, and this just wouldn't be acceptable now in architectural photography to a certain degree. Okay. This is to do with the type of camera she's using and the type of lens. Okay. So it's not, these aren't pristine architectural images that you would expect to see. But Bernice Abbott is held in great esteem. Let's see if I get this bigger again for you.
These stockings.
Aren't they? Isn't it fantastic?
Yeah.
Because what we're getting are these tenement buildings, but also are a sense of, I think of this, if this photograph had been taken without all of the clothes, it probably would be interesting enough with regards to, lots of different things. We have these kids here as well. But with this, I can imagine Bernice, driving past or walking past this and being compelled to take that. And it is about the architecture, but it's also about the architecture of life. It says, for me, it says so much about that time. These are just, it's just, even the way these are, you can even tell the weight of these. You can only imagine what they were like to wear. The tones, the qualities. Now, I'll not labor on all of these, but let's just see. If I can click back. Again, we're not even hitting the building straight on. I think if a student had come into architecture with images like this, it would have felt very foundation-y. It would have felt very, that they didn't really have the eye, I suppose. But I think what Bernice is interested in isn't so much the framing of the outer edges, because of, there's no doubt traffic or whatever. It's this she's really telling us where we're going to look, really dictating where we're looking. Now, I don't know, you guys, whether you'd prefer it without the kids, with the kids. You know, I think the building's stunning, the light's stunning, everything about it. But I think elements like this and this, for me, make the image.
Agree.
Now, Isabel, you'll have to let us know whether, pardon me, I'm sending everybody down the wrong path with regards to this stuff. This is just my own particular thoughts.
No, definitely not. Definitely
Doing
not.
okay?
There's so many different ways of looking at buildings, so it's good to cover a few different people. So no, definitely.
Well, you'll see as we go through. I've only got 3 artists, so it's not that many to look at, but they have different styles. You know, changing the viewpoint, changing the gaze, not always looking straight on. Obviously, in New York, you know, your head's going to be tilted back quite a bit if you're going to be photographing stuff. Belfast, you know, maybe not so much, but I think it's always worthwhile looking above the facade of things. You know, I always think of is it Little Donegal Street where St Anne's Cathedral is? That Little Donegal Street? You know, whenever you walk down there, you know, whenever you start looking up, things become a little bit more interesting for me. There's details to be seen that you could miss very easily. Okay, I'll skip past. Okay. This I love again. I just think that the composition, nowadays this would all be, and you would be shooting that with a tilt shift lens where you wouldn't be getting any of this distortion, or you would be taking it, if you don't want the tilt, if you don't think you need one, you can fix this in post. You could do it in Photoshop or Lightroom or in editing software. You could, I'm not a purist. I don't feel the need to fix things so much unless somebody's paying me, I don't know, for a solid architectural piece of work. Then I would be using a tilt shift lens and making things right. But for this, I think this just works, and there's so much to see. There's so much going on. You know, the people are just reducing size, but we're still getting these grand shapes. Okay, let me go to the next one, if I may. 2 seconds. My son's coming up, by the way. I can hear him. Okay, let me see what this is. 2 seconds. Okay. Okay, so that's Bernice. Julius Schulman. Have we heard of Julius Schulman? No?
No.
Okay, was an American architecture photographer, best known for his photograph and case study House number 22, Los Angeles, 1960. I kind of dream of being known for things like just one piece of work, and it been referenced, and people will be go and look at it. The house is also known as Style House. Schulman's photography spread the aesthetic of California's mid-century modern architecture. Okay, so this is very different than Bernice's work for me in lots of respects. We still have the people, but let's look at the work and see, so you can see what the crack is. My son's been toilet trained, by the way. He's up and down the stairs like Billy. Okay, this is me here. Just 2 seconds to share this. Okay, so this is dynamic LA images from Julius Schulman's archive, not available. This stuff is invaluable for me. Well, for lots of different reasons, but just for seeing work, just for looking at stuff. Okay, so I think there's 6,500 images. We'll look at 5, maybe 6. See what the crack is. This is Julius Schulman photographing case study house number 22, West Hollywood, 1960. Okay, so this is the house that they're talking about. This is the case study number 22, which I just find fascinating. It's worthwhile going and checking this work out, for no other reason, just to be just to see how it works. I think it's just incredible with regards to framing, with regards to composition. everything in it is just beautiful. You know, things like this, these elements in the corners. You know, and if we just think about photographs and you know, photography and in general, and not label it with architectural in front of it, you know, with regards to composition, you know, we're being drawn in. Colors are anchoring and holding the edges, shapes. Okay, so for me, these are things that whenever you're looking through your lens, that you're, you know, this is 100% on a tripod, I would imagine. So it means that the viewer can spend time going around the outside. You know, most for Bernice, everything for me is kind of centered. It's all what I'm looking at feels in the middle of the screen, and the outside of the screen, because of the nature of where she's photographing, doesn't seem to. I'm sure it is taken into account, but with this is kind of meticulous. There seems to be a much, you know, it's framed much squarer on. Let's see. And of course, we've moved into color as well. The shift away from black and white, which can seem kind of seamless in some respects. Whenever you start shifting into color, different aspects come in. You know, for me, if this had been Bernice, you know, it might have been taken slightly closer to give more detail, and the tops wouldn't have been considered maybe so much. But look at how everything is just so. The trees just in, the lamppost holding the edge, running to the corner, you know, running to the corner, these lines. These are the things that whenever you're setting up the shot, you know, this is fantastic, just drawing us right in to the space. And this is 1973. You know, if we think of 1973, you know, with regards to color in black and white, you know, this is Los Angeles. You know, you can imagine the color of the sky, the color of the buildings, but black and white does something different. It makes you concentrate differently. Okay, so that's Julius. Let's move on to, sorry for skipping across so much. I'm sure there's a way of seamlessly doing this, but okay. Okay, so this in Harv. This is kind of where I kind of sit with the whole thing. Was a Hungarian-born photographer. He was a world-leading architecture photographer who captured the forms of buildings, commonly featuring interactions between people and surfaces, as well as shadow play. His minimalistic approach to his compositions is abstract and elegant, and this kind of works for me. Bernice's work doesn't really speak to me in a massive sense because of it feels clunky for me. Julius's work seems super prim, proper. This has kind of an element of both those things. But whenever you start, well, I'll show you the work and I'll show you what I mean. Now, these are much smaller. I fear this is a French website, which, let me just see if I can make this slightly bigger. Is that for, are you guys watching on computer screens or phones?
Phones, so can zoom in.
You can, okay, because it could potentially be very, very small. So this is Lucian's work. There is an absolute ton of stuff here, but I love it. I just love it. It's a different feel altogether. You know, and well, maybe we should have looked at this and not talked about shadow play. Maybe I should have taken that out and talked about it afterwards. But once we can't unsee stuff, but once you get the sense of that, it starts to become super evident how he's using the time of day, you know, the kind of sundial. You could imagine that being taken 3 hours later and it being a pretty flat shot, but this is giving it dimensionality. And again, it is that, it kind of has that Bernice feel in a sense that we're not quite leveling things up. It hasn't got that, it hasn't got the dynamism of the Julius and stuff, but this works for me. Is it leaving you cold?
No.
Is it okay?
Prefer that, more intrigue.
More intrigue for sure, yeah, absolutely. You know, with this sort of stuff here is, you know, it's very clever. Now this, I'll end on this one. I think that's just, you know, I don't know, that for me is probably one of my favorite architectural images. I think this is, I think the kids make it, absolutely. Because the building, if you take all of this away, the building's absolutely stunning. The formation, the everything that's going on is spectacular. But this, for me, there's a thing in photography called punctum, which means that it's written by, there's a guy called Roland Barthes, who's a French, or was a French writer, and he came up with this this word punctum, and it's something in an image that you can't get past. You can't get past it to see the image. And he had an example. He showed a young girl who had primordial dwarfism on the page opposite where he was talking about this. And when you're reading it, you think that the girl herself was going to be the punctum, but actually for him it was a ribbon. Her shoe was untied, and there was this ribbon that he could never get past. He could never look beyond it. And some images have things like this in that just pricks you. It just kind of is, it's always going to be there. Not every image, other images, it's called Camera Lucida, and it's really worth reading. It's not about architecture, it's just about photography. But it's short. I've read it 50 times and I still don't understand it. I understand bits of it, and every time I read it, I get a new sense of what's going on. But for visual readings, for looking at stuff and understanding what we're looking at, it's one of those pieces of writing that that kind of stick with you and put you in a good place, like Tim Berger's ways of saying, I suppose. So this is, let me go out of this. Okay, so that's Lucian. Okay, so that's 3 different kind of photographers. They don't look, you know, if you looked at them kind of, I don't know, on a gallery wall and you were just breezing past, they probably would look fairly similar in a sense, mostly black and white, all architectural, but all very, very, if you sit and actually look at it, all completely different. Do you guys have artists that you kind of reference for, or is it just kind of, are we everyday stuff, just kind of whenever we're rocking up to take a photograph? Is it something that just catches your eye? Are we out walking with a camera, not necessarily going with, to a building? We've seen, like, we've something in our head, we're going to go there and take it. Or are we walking about with the camera and all of a sudden the light hits the building now, so we're like, okay, that's a photograph. Is it that type of walking?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to attempt to change that.
Oh, dear.
Both, really. It depends. Sometimes you can see a building and then you'll take a photograph and then it sticks to your mind, or a building and you know that in that light it's going to be good, so you have to go back to it.
Yeah. And I think this is what I'm going to talk about this just next, if I may, because I think these are the important things, is kind of almost planning. Let's see. Let me just share this with you. Where am I? Okay. So, how to photograph architecture, the not quite complete guide. That said, quiet, just before we started, but my dyslexic brain picked it up, which I was very proud of. The quiet complete guide would have made less sense. Okay, so let me show you. This is where it becomes a wee tiny bit patronizing, but just to humor me. What is architectural photography? Architectural photography generally means photography that focuses on buildings. It can include shooting building exteriors and interiors, as well as bridges, structures, and other cityscapes. Is that kind of how you guys feel about it? Is it kind of, do you have a sense of, are some of you architects? No?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Whenever you look at this, whenever you think about that, is it, you have a very clear view, obviously, about what architecture is?
But I don't think architecture photography should ignore, as in that kind of nearly ignores the context. And I think the context is a biggie.
That I'm so glad that you said that. Everything I'm going to talk about is about context, I think, because I think you're absolutely right. I think that for me, which is why the work of Lucien kind of speaks to me, because I feel that's kind of where it's at for me. How to capture great architectural photography. This is kind of telling my granny how to suck eggs, so to speak, but let's do it anyway. Choosing locations, old buildings, photography makes for captivating images. That includes well-maintained historic sites that offer classic architecture, as well as rundown or abandoned buildings that show age in different ways. This is very loose, okay, super loose, but things to think about, okay, things that sometimes escape people. Is different shooting at various times to capture different looks when shooting structure photography. Try revisiting the site at different times of the day and in different weather conditions. You'd be so surprised how many people just rock up, see a building that they like, just go there without any consideration about weather or time of day. I think the biggest thing that I learned over lockdown was actually a kind of re-looking at stuff. Whenever I had COVID the first time, I was stuck in my room. I think it was for 14 days. And the light coming through my room and how it moved across the room and around the room, I became really fascinated with how it changed the structure of the room. And it's not something I would, if people pay me to go and do stuff, you kind of put a certain not effort, a certain thinking to it. But it's easy to overlook, that if I shoot next week and it's going to be a certain type of day, it's going to be, well, it's going to be cloudy or it's going to be sunny. These things all matter. Are you guys revisiting? Do you go out and just photograph, or would you put it in a book, let's say, and I don't know, if you were, I'm trying to think of somewhere, the Causeway, the Giant's Causeway, that new building that they have at the Giant's Causeway. I've been up there a dozen times and it's beautiful, but it never looks striking. And I've seen so many people taking photographs of it where it's just, the light on it is just stunning. And I haven't got that yet. I haven't managed to go up and be there at the right time. Obviously, because I live in Ballyholden, I'm not close to it. But are these the things that you're thinking about? Are we not thinking stuff? Well, you'll never admit to not thinking things like that. I suppose that's a stupid question. I'll move on. Okay, including some people. Okay, although building photography focuses on buildings, you should consider including people in some of your shots. After all, architecture only exists because of humans. By including people in your architecture, you can bring to mind relationships between humans and architecture and illuminate how people use it. Including people in the composition can also breathe life into otherwise sterile scenes. Okay, you can do that in several ways. One, you can do that by placing somebody there. You can do that by, you know, it would be staged. You can do it just by standing back and letting people move through the scene and capturing them, which kind of, the beautiful thing with shooting buildings in particular, or architecture, is that with cameras, you can do slow shutter speeds. You don't, not everything has to be taken at 200th of a second or 500th of a second, locking everyone into a kind of a walking pose. You know, you could shoot it at a much slower shutter speed and have that beautiful blur. Okay, I'm going to show you something that I actually hadn't planned to show you. I'll show you it after this here, to let you see what I'm talking about. Let me just type something in here. It's a thing called City of Shadows by Alexa Titarenko. Have you heard of him? No? Okay. Oh, that's Alexa talking to me. I thought I was talking to her. Isn't that incredible? Okay, 2 seconds. Just to get this up. Bear with me a second. Oh. Okay, I'm still sharing the screen there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, goodness, because that's what I was looking for. Right, bear with me a second. This is City of Shadows, okay, which is one of my favorite pieces of work. Not necessarily from an architectural point of view, but for what I'm explaining, it kind of makes sense to show it to you. Okay. So you can see slow shutter speed.
Mm-hmm.
The melee outside the train station or the bus station, you know, has, obviously the buildings don't move, so they're always going to be static and stayed. What we have here is these ghost-like visions, and it's just a way of reimagining some stuff. You know, these shoes for me are just, oh, if I can get down to them, down to the bottom there on the left-hand side. Now, let's go out of that a second and go back to the new stuff, which is New York. He's moved from Russia to New York, but kept the same, a slightly tidier aesthetic. The other one felt quite claustrophobic, and it was, those were taken, I think, 90s in Russia, so we can kind of imagine what was going on. This sort of idea here, a slow shutter speed, and you can do this on your phones as well as if you're not shooting on a DSLR. Now he is using colorization, so he's painting some colors in here, which you can ignore. I'll give you an idea, but I think that really works. Okay, let me go back to my presentation. Okay. Okay, dealing with distortion. Are we being purist? Excuse me. Isabel, is it, are we are we judging on things like distortion? Are we overly concerned?
No, to be honest, not really. It's more focusing on telling a story and telling kind of your perception of a building or place. So obviously sometimes you might want to play with distortion if that's something that you kind of feel about the place. So no would be the answer.
Hooray! Okay, good stuff. Yeah, because I think for me, unless you've got specialized equipment, it's going to be difficult to not have an element of it in. But also, interestingly, Isabel, if you with actually manipulating that into having distortion is something I actually didn't think about. Could be part of the storytelling narrative for sure. You can get rid of distortion using Photoshop and Lightroom. If you don't have Photoshop and Lightroom, then you're not be worrying too much about that. And that just means, like, if you photograph a building straight on, you can see how the edges curve in at the top or the bottom. That's the sort of distortion we're talking about, but we'll not worry about it. Okay. This for me is kind of everything that I think about with regards to my art, and it changed me from thinking I was a photographer to a fine artist. So a lot of people seem to think that art or photography is about the way things look or the surface of things. That's not what it's about for me. It's really about relationships and feelings. It's about emotional obsession and empathy. That's by an artist called Nan Golden, who's made so many amazing bits of work, but she did a piece of work called The Ballad of Sexual Dependency, and it's incredible. But this really speaks to me, because whether you're dealing with the work that we're looking at now, or whether you're photographing people, or whether you're documenting people, or whatever you're doing, if you think about it as, are you just photographing the surface of things? Has it that sense of that one dimensionality that you're not really pushing past? Or is it going to be about making a series of images that tell a story? And for me, it's all about telling stories. I teach photography in Belfast Exposed for 14 years, and we always get most people that come in the beginning kind of walk with their camera. They go for a walk, and the sunset happens upon them. The sunset, or a flower happens, or a cow, or something happens that walks in front of them that they choose to photograph. Whereas what I try to do is not to take that away, but to realize that you can start from a different starting point. You can start in the house, and you can say, okay, I'm going to go down and I'm going to photograph X, Y, or Z, and I'm going to do it next week, and I'm going to give myself some rules. I'm not just going to walk out with the camera and something happen upon me. I'm going to go out with the intention of making work. And what that does is, whenever you set out with that, you have a different eye completely. So, if you were setting out to photograph, I don't know, caravan parks on the North Coast, okay, a much overlooked piece of beauty, I think, on the scenery. So you go out, and if I'm going down to do that, I'm not going to do it on a sunny day. I want the day to be grey, overcast, because that's going to be best for photographing glass and photographing the subject I want to do. So I'm going to do a bit of research into that. I'm also going to decide, well, do I want people in it? Do I not want people in it? If I don't want people in it, then it's going to be a wintertime pursuit. If I do want people in it, it's going to be a summertime pursuit. So I'm going to go and maybe you want to do it both. Maybe you want to get a sense of the place being fun and full of life, and the opposite of that being absolutely empty and kind of nothing going on, the bleakness of that. And it's these rules that I apply to nearly every piece of work that I do. I do a bit of research. Let me see. Okay. I do a bit of research, and that is literally just, in fact, I'll do it now after I say this to you. A bit of research, fishing trips, which obviously isn't, I'm vegan, I don't go fishing, but it's, driving up the North Coast with the kids and the wife, driving into the caravan parks, driving around, taking a few images, putting them in a sketchbook, and then merrily thinking and writing about what am I going to do? How many images is it going to be? What's it going to be for? Is it going to be for something like this? Is it going to be for a book? Is it going to be for Instagram? There's a myriad of things that you can influence your work by having a starting point. And then whenever you decide, it's going to be, it's going to be a book. So it's going to be 80 images. And then, how am I going to, what do I want to tell people? What is the story? What am I trying to, with my traveler work, the traveler work is all about human rights. It's all about human rights. Everything about it from the onset has been about human rights, and it has been evolving, and I've been getting better at doing it. But I take photographs to evoke a certain feeling in people. That's my challenge when I go out. How many photographs do I take whenever I'm out? Do I take 10? We have digital cameras now that we can take. How many photographs? I've got a 128 gig card. It's at 1,000, 2,000 shots. The way I deal with it is, are you guys shooting digital or film?
Digital.
Digital, nearly all digital.
Digital.
Yeah,
Yeah.
digital.
Are we allowed to shoot film, Isabel?
Yes, no, the requirements are pretty open, so they are. So no, you can shoot film if you want.
The reason why I say that is because with digital, it's the more you take, digital. People think digital is free because you buy a card, you buy a camera, you stick it in, you go away, you knock yourself out with 200 photographs, and then you come back, and then you're bewildered by these 200 photographs, and it kind of takes an element of time to go through them. But also what happens is it's a speed thing. The more you take, the quicker you take them generally. And I always find that with my camera, whenever I'm doing any job, I still have the 36 rolls of film, or 36 frames in my head. So now I mentally put in my card, I'm really putting in a 36 film. And then I know I've got 36 shots. Now, what that does is it slows you down. And with architecture and landscape, you want to be, for me, you want to be slower. Okay, you don't want to be picking the camera up, finding something interesting, taking a snap and moving on. You maybe want to involve a tripod, which means you have to set something up, so that takes time. Put your camera on it, that takes time, and then look around the frame, and that takes time. And then you get that, that mix of the three artists that we've just spoke about. You can go, Bernie's was definitely quicker, Julius was definitely slower, and then kind of for me somewhere in the middle is Lucerne. So we get these habits that we get into, because what that does, it just makes you a better photographer. You're looking around, whenever I'm sitting here now with my, I'm in my bedroom, a forced office. Okay, I thought very carefully about what I wanted you guys to see, because if I move the camera, I dread to think, I won't go too far, I'll embarrass myself. If I go this way, there's a bed that my wife had to leave so I could do this. It's not pleasant. Okay, so you can see what I mean. If I tilt up or I tilt down, it's the edge of the frame, and these are the things we want to think about. So rules are really important for me going out. Planning to take more than one image. Now, if you're going to go and take how do we do that, or why would we want to tell a story? I remember a guy coming in, a guy called Chris, who's a friend now, but he went to Belfast Exposed, and he did a beautiful piece of work on a building on the Malone Road, and it was a building that it was part of a school, and he went there. I think he went to nursery school in the building, and then later on it became his digs whenever he was at university, and it's where he met his wife. And he went and it had now become abandoned, and it was getting wrecked. And he kind of, every time he drove past it, he was like, God, it meant so much to him that he wanted to document it. So he went in and made this beautiful set of images that was just, they were just sets of images. But whenever he spoke about it, whenever he said what it was, this room was where you know, as a 2-year-old, I was running around. This room is where my wife and I used to sneak her in, and we used to cuddle on the couch. You know, the building then became really alive. It wasn't just this kind of boring old building. That's another thing as about hit me saying that. But you know, it didn't, because nobody showed it to me. It was pretty innocuous. There wasn't anything that stood out architecturally. It wasn't really beautiful one way or the other. But then whenever he started telling this and you started looking at the details, it really spoke. So he planned to go out and do that, you know, and that's the difference between just rocking up, taking an image of something you find desirable and not. Another lady came in to Belfast Exposed, and I would give everybody like 5 or 6 things they could do. They could rework an LP cover, they could do journey, they could do work. And this lady came back, and it was 5 images, and it was a house, a zebra crossing, a garage, something in a car park. And she put them up, and they were just very simple photographs. And then she said that she'd went back to the house where her mum and dad had got divorced, and this was the journey that her mum would take her on a Saturday to her dad. And every object that she saw, the zebra crossing, made her happy and sad, because she knew she was getting further away from her mum but closer to her dad. And it was just this beautiful story in these 5 images of this simple journey that was architectural, it was urban, it was everything, but it was just, I never forget it. Everyone was so moved. We were just like, and she was a grown woman. She was in her 60s. This wasn't like a kind of a young person. So those for me are the difference between having things that are planned and not. If you go onto my Instagram, like 99% of my life isn't planned, of the kids and everything else. But the stuff I do for other stuff is all planned, and all has a modicum of rule around it somewhere, if that makes sense. God, probably bored the life out. How long has that been? 1 hour and 15 minutes. And my son hasn't come in, and I haven't coughed myself to death. It's just been good. Have you any questions? Apart from why did Chris do this?
If you do have any questions, please feel free. You can unmute yourselves and just speak up, or you're welcome to put something in the chat box either.
Oh, you can ask anything about cameras, about, I don't know, light, about lenses.
I suppose I'll probably ask a few questions while people maybe are thinking about what they want to ask. I just kind of jotting a few things down that people might want to think about. So obviously you would kind of use a smartphone when you're kind of, as you say, doing your unplanned things. But if you were using a smartphone to do the challenge, because obviously not everyone will have access to a camera, what different approaches would you use from kind of going out with, you know, a proper digital SLR or something like that?
You know what, I think, in all honesty, I'm so not snobby about this. I really do believe that the future is here. You know, I could definitely do my set stills in this if there wasn't some sort of need for people to see me with a lens that's cost £3,000. The project I did in my dad was on an iPhone 7, and it was in vogue. It was all, nobody cared. You know, it's not, unless you're blowing something up. The only negative to this is the size of the print you can produce, and every year that goes past, you know, the pixels are. In fact, this phone here has more pixels in it than my camera that I first did my first feature with, easily. You know, the renders far better, everything else. I think what I remember with your phone is that a lot of people are fascinated by holding the phone like this to talk, and that always translates into holding a phone to take photographs like this. You know, it's very, you know, the landscape and the portrait are 2 considerations. You know, if you're, and well, the other thing is, of course, on the phone we have pano, you know, on this phone here, so I can do panoramic shots. Now, sometimes they're very interesting, and sometimes they're not very interesting. So it depends what you're shooting. there's no snobbery if you don't have a DSLR, and most people nowadays don't. You know, I teach a lot of kids, and there's always an area of contention with me and another colleague about the need for a digital SLR and the need for the camera. My passion is that that people use phones. They don't need to use because I'm not sure if you know from a smartphone perspective that you can do so much in these, with regards to changing. You can focus on parts of the screen. You can change your exposure. All that stuff is so easily done. So I wouldn't be thinking that you're under any hardship by shooting on and even an old phone. I think actually sometimes my son is mad at the minute into glitchiness. He loves that kind of older phone look on an image, and he's only 8.5, and I kind of get that. So I think you just, there's a famous saying, what's the best camera? I can get this right. The camera you have in your pocket is the best camera to use, for sure.
Yeah. No, I think it kind of goes back. If anyone's in Marcus's drawing workshop, he always says, remember that you're the only person who can draw a building the way you can. Like, you bring your own unique perspective to everything. So it's not all about having the equipment, it's about having your points of view and kind of your eyes, really. But in terms of, I know that you said that you would really kind of consider things if you're going out kind of on a shoot. What would you recommend that people would kind of use as a basic rule? So for example, if they had a smartphone, would you suggest they'd bring a tripod for the smartphone, or
for a smartphone, things like a beanbag? I think what I think is brilliant. I remember doing a project. The Arts Council have been very, very kind to me, and they're awesome, I have to say. And I wanted to document churches along the border that had fallen into disrepair because of depopulation of Protestants or Catholics. But part of my strategy for that was that I wanted to use the church as the tripod. I wanted to use the pews as the tripod. I wanted to use that viewpoint for the camera. Now that was two reasons. One, I didn't have a tripod, and the other was actually, out of not having a tripod, I thought, actually, why don't I? And I just did a beanbag, and I would just literally set it down and put the camera on it, and that was the great leveler, I suppose, because what it did is it changed most photographs are taken as humans are taken between 5'4" and 6'1", that with this space on Earth that we're constantly photographing, and rarely do we go down unless we're photographing kids, or do we go up if we're pointing up the buildings. So most of this. So I think that things like beanbags. There's an array of stuff you can get. You can get really super cheap tripods, like ones that grab onto trees, and you can kind of lean out and put it on and get things like that. And I think it's also that what it does is it changes your viewpoint. I think phones are great for that, because you don't have to be so handy with them. You can kind of you can go up here or down here or wherever and play with it.
Mm-hmm. I remember also, I remember being inspired to buy, I haven't actually used them, I'll admit this, a series of lenses for my smartphone as well, because you can actually get a whole range of different things that'll, so if you want to be able to take a picture of a building and get the whole building in the shot, which can be quite difficult, obviously you can get a lens for that actually attached onto your smartphone, and they're very affordable. So that's something you can always have a play around as well, I guess.
I think it's great. It's a great idea, Isabel, because they are cheap. You can get ones at a few £100 if you want to knock yourself out, if you've got tons of cash. But the ones that are affordable, what I would say is do a wee tiny bit of research into how they stick to the back of the camera. The biggest complaint isn't the glass that they're made with; it's always that they go on and then they fall off at some awkward time. But they are brilliant. The wide angle in particular is very good. And if you're buying a wide angle for a DSLR, you'll use it 12 times, and then you'll sell it on eBay.
So I think there were probably two kind of more technical questions, I guess. Has anyone, if anyone has got anything, please feel free. I'm just being nosy and satisfying my own curiosity of things that I've written down, but please feel free if you want to jump in and ask Chris anything, please do. But one thing I was kind of struck by is going back to Bernice's work. I think you said that it didn't speak to you as much as the likes of Lucian's work. But there was one image that you showed, and it was the office. It was like the office building, you know, with the cars outside, and all the windows open. But you said that you kind of wouldn't really get away with this shot nowadays. And I was kind of wondering what kind of made you say that.
Right. Well, I think if a client was paying me to go and photograph a building in the center of New York, let's say there was a kind of bit of strange time travel, I think that if I landed back with that image, they would probably be slightly concerned about my technical capabilities, let's say. But I think Bernice, you know, the interesting thing is, you know, if we brought tilt shift lenses and, you know, a whole load of gear to Bernice and left it at her feet, would she, you know, these are my friend Terence, the guy that changed everything for me, the guy from South Africa, used to make me sit down and have imaginary conversations with Susan Sontag and Roland Barthes. Just sit them in a room and imagine them having a conversation, and that led to strange thoughts like, you know, imagine bringing Bernice a bag of stuff. Would it change what she would do? Would it, you know, if I had her bag of stuff, would it change what I would do? And those for me are that's the fascinating stuff. I think I love Bernice's work. It speaks to me as an artist, but from a technical point of view, I think it's a different, you know, of course I could show, you know, 100, you know, there's a guy, a guy I follow on Instagram from here, who's just the best architect. Every time it comes up, I'm just like, oh my God, this architectural stuff is just sublime. His name will come to me, but yeah, I think it's that stuff that I'm always erring between being a fine artist and kind of being super playful in life, and then these jobs that I have to do where I have to know a certain amount of technical aspects to give the client what they're expecting. Is that so? I was coming from a client point of view there, not from a Chris Barr point of view.
Yeah, no, well, like I know where you're coming from, because I know, like, thinking about our publications in UAH, obviously a lot of ours would be all about kind of getting the clean images so you can see the details of the building, because that's obviously the focus of the publication. That's kind of what we were after. But obviously some of the images that aren't kind of so technical can be really interesting in their own ways, as you say. So no, I really enjoyed Bernice's work, but it was more kind of the distortion that you were kind of thinking about from that point of view.
Well, some of the things like the window, you know, I've just come back from Universal Studios, and we were shooting in a fake castle, and it was for the new Game of Thrones, the prequel to the Game of Thrones, and you know, no expense spared. These things are fantastic, and there's knights and horses. The whole thing is glorious, and all I want to do is take a photograph of the knights with a crane in the background, because that, for me, that kind of, you know, everything is so well thought out. Everything, all the angles are right. You can shoot from this, that, and the other. But from some angles, you can get a knight with a huge crane in the background, which I find far more interesting. I find that stuff far more interesting. You know, all that sort of stuff. You know, or somebody dressed as a knave sitting on the Mac at dinner time. I find that stuff much more playful.
Yeah. So does anyone have any more questions for Chris? Or
I never ask questions at university, by the way, so this is karma. I would always definitely not on like sitting like this here.
I don't have a question. I would just like to say thank you. I have to head on now, but as I say, lots to think about. Really enjoyed your talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'll tell my wife you said that.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. So I suppose we're coming just up to 25 past. Did you have anything more you want to say, Chris, or would you like me to wrap up?
No, I just think that the person who's come in saying sorry I'm late is absolute genius. I think it's
Well, don't worry, whoever that is, this talk is being recorded, so you'll be able to look back at it later on. So don't panic, because I know that you kind of came in, I think, just at the start of kind of the Q&A. So we can have a wee look back at that later. But I'll just do a quick wrap up about the actual challenge itself. So I know I touched on it briefly at the start. But the aim of these workshops is to get you to kind of go out and really create something about a building or place that really speaks to you. Could be somewhere that you absolutely hate. It doesn't have to be somewhere you love. The only requirement that we have, it has to be a historic building, but that is anything that's over 30 years old. So that's pretty open as a requirement. There is a few more submission requirements, just general ones on our website. So I'll pop the link in the chat box anyway. But it's just ulsterarchitecturalheritage.org.uk/heritage arts challenge. And you can also catch up on all the other workshops from there as well. Now, the submission date is coming up quite closely. So you're due to submit by the 30th September. So you might have to get your skates on for producing something. Some of you might already have come up with some ideas and might have already taken your images. But for anyone else that hasn't quite got there yet, please get out there and give it a go, because we'd love to see your work. And the next stage of the project is that selected participant from each discipline will actually get to work with the mentor on a one-to-one basis to develop their work. So that's a really exciting opportunity for you to kind of get feedback and to try something new and get a new perspective. So I would really encourage you to get involved. So I think that wraps us up. So that just leaves me to say thank you so much, Chris, for your talk. It has been brilliant to see so many different perspectives of kind of looking at buildings from a technical perspective and also, you know, from a personal perspective. So thank you very much. And thank you everyone as well for coming along today and getting involved. And yes, I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with. So thank you very much, and we'll see you later.
Thank you guys.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.